what's up? Welcome to Middle School Ministry. Thanks so much for joining us. For those that don't know me, my name's Royce. I'm helping out this summer with MSM. I spoke a few Sundays ago, so you probably saw me in person or online. I'm probably currently falling off a river raft right now, which means we are currently at camp, but we can't wait to see you on YouTube or in person next week. So some announcements today is to be sure to follow us on social media, specifically with Instagram. You will see our life groups in our highlights. You'll see baptism information. You'll see Bible challenges. You'll see what we're up to and upcoming events. Also in that bio, you'll see a link, and among other things, one of them is the Bible plan, which we'll talk about later. But that's a very helpful form of getting to know what's happening with middle school ministry. Speaking of the Bible plan, we are currently in the theme of worth repeating, so that is our Bible plan. It started on July 11th, and it's not too late to start now with us. For the people that are currently doing it, keep doing it. We love being in the Word with you guys. And for those that haven't started yet, it is not too late. Come join us, be in the Word with us, interact with the Bible plan. You can use your parents' phone, you could use your iPad, you could use your phone. You can either scan the QR code that's on a big piece of paper in the middle school ministry room. You could check it out through your parents' email. We emailed you guys the Bible plan, the YouVersion Bible plan, or you could check it out on our social media as well. And that's all for announcements today. So just sit back and get ready to hear the message today on week 2 of Worth Repeating.
Recently just graduated into high school ministry, but I still feel like I'm a middle schooler because all the high schoolers seem way too big to me. Today I thought I'd share a couple of things, starting off with my favorite memories in middle school, and then moving on to a message that I just thought of very recently. So my favorite times in middle school. Life groups is for sure probably the best time, because life groups is, I didn't start going to life groups until about 7th grade, so like a year later than I was eligible to. And I'd heard about it, but I've never really taken the time to go understand it and everything. And up until then, I thought faith was kind of like your own personal thing with God, and only God and you have this relationship, and that every person is unique and different, which part of that statement is true, but part of it is a little bit flawed. So, yes, everyone's walk of faith is unique and not the same or identical to anyone else's, but there are people going through the same struggles, hardships, and even strengths, and I don't know what you'd call it, victories in faith that you would have. And life groups really helped me to realize that there are other people in church there for me. It was an amazing time to socialize and just have fun. I remember the first time we were there, my friends and I went around, maybe it's just me, went around screaming, "There's chocolate chip cookies!" And I just remember that moment so clearly because so much fun was had in life groups. We would go get boba and all this awesome stuff. We'd go not trick-or-treating. It's kind of like trick-or-treating. It's called Bigger or Better. Riot nights are awesome. Those were all in life groups. Another favorite memory is Fall Frenzy of 2019. A funny story. My friends and I, about 7 of us, we ran back to our cabin, and we were without Anthony. Anthony, who's our counselor. And our cabin was locked, so we didn't have a way to get in. Basically, what we did is we somehow found a way to disassemble the window to the cabin from the outside. We lifted Rylan, you guys probably know him. We lifted Rylan through the window, the very small window, and he climbed through. He ran to the door and unlocked it for us. It's those types of super random moments where you think you're locked out of a cabin, but then you end up getting in, that are just super memorable for me. Yeah, those are probably my favorite memories. I'm really excited for every single person in middle school right now, because you guys are going to be able to experience the same things that I got to experience, and I know I had a blast. So, to something more recent, I recently went to high school ministry summer camp, which is at Rock and Water, which is where you guys are going to summer camp too. So, you guys will have the same exact experience. So, when I went to Rock and Water's a campsite right by this big lake with rapids and everything. We went canyoneering, which is basically like hiking but in water. And we went to a canyon. We went to go hike in water, and uh, we hiked for a while, and then we stopped. And our leader asked us to go and have quiet time. So basically, what quiet time is when you go into God's creation, and when you just get to spend time with Him and have a conversation. You're alone, not really friends or anything near you, so you don't have any distractions, and you just get to talk with God. It's a great time to pray. It's a great time to reflect. So I decided to go across these rapids and onto this rock. And there I was, my feet dangling inches above these really cool rapids. And for the first 5 minutes of silence, I was pretty bored. Honestly, I wasn't bored, but I wasn't thinking about faith or God really. I was thinking about like, what are we having for dinner, and what are we gonna do when we get back to camp? And then I got bored of thinking about what was for dinner, and I looked down um, below my feet, and I saw the rapids, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. The rapids below me, you could see water crashing against the rocks and turning from blue-ish clear to like white, and it was super cool to see. Um, so I saw the rapids and the water from there, and rapids must come from somewhere. So I looked further in front of my feet, and I saw a river. Um, Once again, I was thinking of stuff to think of, if that makes sense, and I just settled on the river. I was like, wow, that's a really cool river. Let's start thinking about it. So, what is a river? I started thinking about what a river was. And I eventually, I sat on this question for like 2 straight minutes, just thinking, what is a river? Sometimes you don't stop enough to like question some, um, some things in your life. I didn't stop and think of what a river was until we were like 3 hours into hiking in it. And I eventually settled that a river is a combination of a bunch of these hydrogen and oxygen molecules that come together and form this really wet thing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called water. And once you have enough of this water, it can become like a huge body of water. It can all collect in one big place, and that's called a lake. But what was in front of me was not a lake, it was a river. What's the difference between a lake and a river? Well, a lake just sits still, and a river moves. So, if a river moves, what causes a river to move? I spent a good solid 5 minutes just thinking about what causes a river to move. I know, it's an incredibly faith deep question that you would find in a workbook talking about faith. No, it's a random thought I had. So I sat for like 5 minutes just thinking about what a river was. And it eventually hit me. No, not why or how a river moves, but a random thought popped into my head, and it was that God's love is like a river. God's love is like a river. And the more and more I thought about it, the more and more it started to make sense. A river can be violent and it can be rough, but it can also be calm and peaceful. It can be fast, it can be slow. It can have beautiful, like, streams and everything, or it can have really violent crashings and waves. But a river never stops moving. And if we transfer those ideals to God's love in a like kind of like a metaphor or a comparison, you see the exact same things. God's love can be fast or slow. It can happen in violent times. It can happen in calm and peaceful times. It can happen wherever. And just like a river, the most important aspect of God's love is that it never stops moving. A river never, ever, ever stops moving, just like God's love. No matter how fast, no matter how slow it moves, God's love never stops moving. It keeps flowing and it never stops. water, just like God's, or if we think of water as God's love, it also makes sense. Humans can't survive without water, just like how we can't survive without God's love. Water is bendable, it's flexible, it can fit into any container, just like God's love. I sound like a broken record, but God's love can fit into any situation. It can fit into triumphant victories or miserable defeats. God's love is just like water again. It can be soft, it can be strong. Water can be violent, it can be calm. God's love is so many things, but in that moment, I just thought of it as water and a river. We can't survive without God's love, just like how we can't survive without water. You might be thinking, who is this guy, and why did he just compare water to God's love? God's holy love, why did he compare it to something I can get out of my faucet? I just took everyone here on a wild roller coaster ride all through my brain. And if you got lost anywhere on that roller coaster, I kindly ask that you would take something out of this message. Or if you take anything, that it would be this. God's love never fails. It's like a river. It has calm and peaceful parts. But the most important part is that God's love never fails. It's always moving, no matter if you realize it or not. God's love is like, if you've ever watched, like, for example, the NBA finals that are going on right now, there's players who would reach down for their teammates and pull them back up. God is that teammate reaching down to pick us up, no matter what situation, in good ones and bad ones. God is always there to help yank us back to our feet. And all we as servants and followers of God have to do is reach back up so God can grab us. That's all we have to do. He's there to yank us up. All we have to do is reach out our hand. And to me, that's really just incredible, because it's, as humans, we sin so much, and God never sins, yet he still finds the love and time and I don't know how to call it. It's pretty cool. That's how I can describe it. He still finds the love, the time, the effort. He puts all of this stuff into us, even though we're imperfect beings. So no matter what version of God's love you're going through, a faster and more violent version, or maybe a calmer and slower version, I ask that you keep in mind that God's love is always there. Good times and bad times. If we can look at the silver linings to negative situations, our entire perspectives change. And these lyrics tie perfectly into a song that I love. It's called One Thing Remains. The lyrics go, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Because on and on and on and on it goes, before it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I'll never ever have to be afraid. One thing remains. And that one thing that remains is always God's love, because his love is always there. Psalm 136 says, only God works great miracles. God's love never fails. With wisdom he made the sky. God's love never fails. The Lord stretched the earth over the ocean. God's love never fails. He made the bright lights in the sky. God's love never fails. He lets the sun rule each day. God's love never fails. He lets the moon and stars roll each night. Now, I know that verse sounds a little bit repetitive, but I think it really gets a great point across. It takes so many, in the grand scheme of things, it's not too many, but it's out of the many and billions and zillions, it's not a word, I don't think, and trillions of examples of God's love. It talks about specific ones, like how he stretched the earth across the ocean, or he put the sun in the sky. And those are powerful examples, but it keeps repeating one thing. It says God's love never fails. Through all of those examples and the countless other ones that I can't think of, his love never fails. I really Can't emphasize that enough. Thank you guys so much for listening to my message. I hope you guys got to take something out of it. Yeah, that's all I had. Bye. Thank you.
Our faith in that. Let's sing together. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you had never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Let's declare this. Your promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. You won't start now. And I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass, and my heart will sing your praise again. Come on, let's tell him, Jesus, you're still enough. And Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. You won't start now. All right, come on, church. Let's sing it together. I've seen you move. See you do it again. You sing this. I've seen you